Okay, welcome again. We are on chapter 8, the joy of being, and we will begin with meditation. So let's just start by becoming aware that we are aware. Notice that you are aware of, for instance, the sound of my voice, sensations on the skin, the feeling of in-breath and out-breath. And I just invite us all to, as best we can, become less interested in the content of our experience. In other words, become less interested in what you're aware of and more interested in the fact of being aware. Becoming less interested in the thoughts that may be moving and more interested in the fact of awareness. In Rupert's words, we are allowing ourself to emerge from the background of experience. And he also says, all that is required is to soften the focus of our attention from its content and allow it to come back to ourself. So I invite you to practice that now. Soften the focus of your attention and allow it to come back to yourself. And then, as best you can, just rest there as awareness. And now I'll begin our transition into the rest of our study. But I invite us all to continue to, again, as best we can, give our attention to awareness, even in the midst of experience. So as we begin to invite experience back in, keep the metaphorical spotlight on awareness, on being, even in the midst of changing experience. So one more time, presence yourself, however you do that, as being, as awareness, and begin to allow experience of the world to come back in. Sometimes I invite us to do that with deep belly breaths. So beginning to allow experience back in, keep the spotlight, keep the focus on awareness, on being. And even as we gently open our eyes and take in the room, take in the world, practice giving our attention to being, to awareness. So, anything to share before we get into the reading? Anything alive for you from the meditation?
I have some serious heart palpitations, and they started as soon as so I put my hands over my heart. But it was as soon as the meditation started, I could feel this heart opening up. I don't know, thinking I wish this would go on for hours. Yeah, it's just been a real interesting, it's slowed down, but it was, anyway, palpitating, not scary, it's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Caroline.
I went really deep, really fast too. And it was a very beautiful experience, and kind of having to make myself come back into full consciousness. It was sweet. Well, I don't know if sweet is the right word, but it was profound. Yeah. Big, deep, wide. It feels like really superpower energy in a quiet way.
Yeah. What that brings to mind for me is like what a practice it is to be this expansive, limitless self that we are, in the midst of experience, right? Like to bring it back into, relationships and like challenging meetings, or whatever, like gosh, what a practice it is to bring these experiences of truth into seemingly limited form and like put it into, finite words that I'm going to express to you now to convey my experience, or, like, wow, what a practice it is to be the fullness. Yeah. It reminds me of my check-in, at least, the line that I'm, trying to walk, like being the full self in the midst of, habits and patterns of being limited. Well, anybody want to start us off on chapter 8? Reading the first section.
Looks
I'm happy
like
to
I'll
go
be,
first. Go ahead.
I was just gonna, looks like I'll be listening because I couldn't find anything
Okay.
electronic to read, so I will be attentive.
Great. Well, I'm happy to read first. Chapter 8. The Joy of Being. There is nothing extraordinary, complicated, or difficult about recognizing our essential nature and accessing its innate peace and happiness. If our thoughts, feelings, and perceptions are dense and heavy, then the light of being will seem to be dimmed by them. Our self will be darkened by experience. Enlightenment is simply the thinning of the layer of thoughts and feelings that veil being, just as clouds dissipate to reveal the ever-present sky. Terms such as enlightenment, awakening, and liberation have become so laden with association and misunderstanding that the truth to which they point is often overlooked. They tend to confer an extraordinary or exotic flavor on the simple recognition of our own being, implying it is a marvelous event that happens to a few special people, either spontaneously or as a result of strenuous discipline and practice. Far from being extraordinary or exotic, our own being is the most ordinary, intimate, and familiar experience. By comparison, the taste of tea, a feeling of sorrow, or a thought about work tomorrow is exotic. What may be extraordinary are the cultures to which many people have traveled, intellectually, if not physically, in their quest for peace and happiness. People conflate the unusual traditions and customs of such cultures with the simple recognition of their own being, and imagine as a result that it requires special practices, circumstances, or relationships. All these are distractions, albeit refined ones, from the simple knowing of our own being, from which one must sooner or later return. These cultures may hold the promise of the transcendent or mystical, appealing to our intuition that the fulfillment of our longing for peace and happiness is not to be found as an extension of our ordinary experience. However, beneath our thoughts and feelings and their expression in activities and relationships, we are all the same. If we had been able to take samples of the sense of being myself from people at different periods in history and from different cultures, before their knowledge of their self was qualified by any particular experience, each sample would be identical. Being never changes. sooner or later we see with absolute clarity that the peace and happiness for which we long above all else can only be found within our own being. And as a result, we return to ourself from the adventure of experience. So let's discuss that.
The term endarkening. Did I hear that right? Endarkening? I've never heard before. Or
No, did I say
endarkenment.
that?
Yeah.
Endarkenment or endarkening.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
That was
he made it up. It's a made
It's
up
just-
word.
I've never heard it before.
Yeah.
It grabbed my attention.
Yeah.
If our thoughts, feelings, and perceptions are dense and heavy, then the light of being will seem to be dimmed by them. Our self will be darkened by experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how I feel. It really sums up like the meditation. I had the opposite of experience of you, maybe all of you, but I felt very shallow. I felt like I was hanging onto a beach ball and I couldn't get under the surface of the waves. Yeah. Anyway, feel the weight of my mind wanting to be fixed on the content, and it's hard to it's feeling very uncharacteristically difficult for me to drop below all that content and access the awareness below it. So I resonate with that part, being darkened by experience. I feel a bit darkened right now.
Well, it's interesting. That last paragraph is exactly what I said in the share this earlier. I mean, I was on a quest for my entire adulthood. Please show me peace, God, and I would beg from the ego to just be spared. I wasn't clinically depressed or anything, but it was this, I wonder if that was like spirit tapping on me, trying to crack the eggshell, so to speak. But I kind of thought too, as I read this, that I drifted through life, never once questioning who I am. And yet that seems like such a simple thing to do in this journey for me now, to come back to that question. That was the initial question that woke me up. Who am I? Why did it take so long? So I love the way he says with absolute clarity that the peace and happiness for which we long above all else can only be found within our own being. The world conditioned me to think that everything outside of myself would finally bring me to peace. You just haven't found that right door to open. And the door was right here. It was within. So anyway, I really resonate with that beautiful little closing paragraph. And the adventure of experience, I beg to differ. At times it doesn't feel very adventurous, but I know what he speaks of.
Yeah. I like to think of the adventure of experience sometimes just like the way that it's alluring to put our problems out there, as like I sort of sum that up as the victim story. And you know, it's so challenging, I find, to fully give up the victim story. It's something that I've been working on for so long, and I've been so committed to giving up the victim story. And I think I've got a lot of tools and a lot of skill to give up the victim story, and a lot of allies to give up the victim. You know, there's a lot going for me. And still it's like, wow, I still really want to be the victim sometimes. And I still really want there to be a problem out there, because I want it to be somebody else's fault that something is happening, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the victim story perpetuates an identity, and we wonder, who am I going to be without that identity?
Yeah.
And, you know, the natural thing to do when you're, like, for me, if I'm in that place, is, yeah, I used to want to share that. But that whole victim thing, I clung that one hard over my family of origin, because I've lost them all. But I wouldn't trade anything, you know, but I know it was giving up this concept that my identity was found in a family. I finally started asking myself recently, what is it about the concept of family for me that is so important? Why am I clinging to this? But in the culture of which I thought about it, to be outside the family was death. It's like, I need to be with the tribe to survive. When I realized I don't need this to survive, I can start to let go of that identity that I kept claiming as a victim, you know. So it is hard. It is very, I totally understand where you're coming from. But I think it's letting go of an identity or a role.
Yeah. I think the biggest role for me is, or related to it, that I have a challenge of giving up, is like, other people need my help. Like, it's sort of the role of helper, which is interesting, but that it's like directly tied in to me, to the victim role. Like, I need to believe that there's a problem so that I can help fix the problem. And I imagine that if I don't think there's a problem anymore, then I won't be helpful.
Caroline, you pointed out the last paragraph. Sooner or later, we see with absolute clarity that the peace and happiness for which we long above all else can only be found within our own being. It makes me think of kind of like ripening. Like it's an experience turning within to find that peace within ourselves. It's almost like it has to ripen. Like it's not the default or standard condition of third density human beings. It's not like the automatic thing that we tend to do. Like even without our culture, like even without like any outside influences, it seems like, to me, it seems like it's the design to come into this veiled, incarnated human experience and be fascinated by the victim, be fascinated by the content of experience, sometimes for a good long while, until it starts to become either boring or like painful enough that we look in a different way, and start to like come home to ourselves or something. So yeah, it just seems like the sooner or later represents like a process, a natural process of ripening that has to happen or something.
Totally. I think so too. I think of that as like the process of our freedom, and like it's like sort of paradoxical that we need to honor our freedom to be in the illusion in order to release the illusion. Like, I think that's a big piece of there's like, know yourself, accept yourself, become the creator. I think a big part of the accept yourself is giving ourselves the freedom to be in the, like, I sometimes think of it as the is and the isn't, The is like the ultimate truth. That's all there is. But there's the apparent isn't, which is like, turning away from the light and pretending that the light isn't there. It's like, the ability for there to be a shadow, which is not really there, or it's an illusion, or, it's not what it seems to be. It's the isn't. And like honoring our freedom to be in that, to be what we're, to apparently be what we're not, I think is part of the ripen, is one of the ways that I think of the ripening that I think you're talking about. Like allowing ourselves the freedom to be in the illusion and in what isn't brings us to the real freedom, the real experience of freedom from what isn't.
Yeah.
But we have to be free to do it first.
Yeah. Abraham Hicks said, you know what you do want when you know what you don't want. So I played with these shiny toys all my life, but they didn't bring more than the adventure of experience, but yet was necessary on this path for growth and expansion, evolution. But when he said sooner or later, I took that as in this lifetime or another. Eventually, we're all going to get there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's how I interpreted later.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, how about we read the next section?
Sure. I can read the next one.
Great.
What is traditionally referred to as enlightenment is not an evolution or a development of ourself. It is simply the revelation of the self that lies at the heart of all experience, irrespective of its content, the self we always and already are, but have overlooked due to the clamor of experience. The word revelation comes from the Latin revelar or revelare, meaning to lay bare. Enlightenment is simply the laying bare of our essential being. Not how our being might become if we meditate for long enough, or practice hard enough, or if we follow one teacher or tradition as opposed to another. The recognition of our true nature as inherently peaceful and unconditionally fulfilled awareness is not something a person attains. Only awareness is aware. It is awareness that loses itself in experience and seems to become a temporary, finite self or person, and then returns to or recognizes itself again. Just as John Smith veils himself with his own activity, seeming to become King Lear, and then unveils himself. There is no such thing as an enlightened person. In the ultimate analysis, there simply is no independently existing person in the first place to be enlightened or not. Neither the Buddha, nor Ramana Maharshi, nor Meister Eckhart was enlightened. There is only the light of the self, the light of our being, veiling itself with its own activity of thinking and perceiving, then unveiling and seeming to return to itself. To be established in our true nature implies that experience has lost its capacity to veil its reality. As we sink more and more deeply into our being, the layers of experience which once seemed to obscure our true nature become progressively more transparent and, in time, shine with the light of being.
Let's open it up.
I love this. at the very beginning, it's so simple if we could let it be. It's not out there. We don't chase anything. We don't need a path. The path is here. You know, I mean, we can choose to connect and learn from others and really have profound experiences. But it's not like something is going to click in us once we get to a certain place or we achieve a certain thing. There was something in that first couple of sentences, like that what it felt like to me is when whenever it is, however it is along our path, when we can see it's me, it's here, it's me, I'm there, I don't have anywhere to go, I'm here, you know, it's so beautiful to stop trying. There's nothing to try for. And I understand it's so simple, and yet it's complex because we are. Yeah.
Yeah. I was struck with this remembrance of the first very initial stages of waking up. I would have some profound moments at the gym. This is when I would go to the gym like every day. And I can remember standing in the gym with all those mirrors. I was lifting this weight and I was like, who is the one who's watching the one who is lifting these weights? I just came out of nowhere. And I started seeing this connection between myself and all the people there. Like I was really floating into some serious, and I wondered if it was the changing of physical energy by being in the gym that really catapulted this awakening journey in me. And it was profound. And then one day I was working out and all of a sudden everything became so intensely bright I couldn't see. And I left and drove in my car and everything was completely bright. And I wound up going into about an 8-hour ascension journey that was incredible and mind-blowing, but my whole body was vibrating, my muscles were shaking and all this, but it kicked off at the gym and that happened twice. But I love that feeling of looking in the mirror and going, who is the one who is watching the one who is working out? So when I read this little piece of our chapter, I thought about like this, I don't know, I'm thinking of like in the movies when something goes through a wall and comes back out, you know, it's kind of like I'm over here and now I'm here. But being over there in the state of awareness has become more frequent for me, which used to be, I think initially I had to really think about this. I am not that. I am not that. I'm not my thoughts. I'm not my body. I would say this all the time. So I think to get this journey kickstarted, I had to be in a state of perpetual, like almost like resistance. I'm not that anymore. I am this. I had to convince the ego that this is who I am and just start knocking down some walls, you know? And then there's this softness for me and this gentleness that started seeping in. I didn't have to work quite as hard, I suppose. But I kept thinking, I want to be enlightened. I want to go for, you know, this whole 3D hustle and grind in me. Like, I got to get there. For me, that was necessary. So, you know, anyway, I did like this little piece, and it brought me back to my old gym days, and I like when he says there's no such thing as an enlightened person. I used to think I want to be like Muji. That was like my role model for a long time. I just want to have his aura. um, is that the state of someone who's aware in default, like perpetually aware? Very calm. So would you say there's nothing to hold on to with mind? And I've always been drawn to him. So I guess I suppose the further I go with this journey, maybe the more resonate in that pocket of perpetual awareness. Mm-hmm.
It's good. He's a good bookmark to aspire, or not bookmark's the wrong word, but role model. His energy is so lovely. Muji is so wonderful.
I know. I mean, like I would cry. I would pull up his videos and just start sobbing. And I could hear people sobbing at his retreats. And I'm like, whoa. But his meditation, See Without Eyes, I Know Without Mind, I've probably played 175 times. I've meditated to that. It's just, I would do walking meditations and play this. He's got a vibe that I just completely dig.
Is that meditation on YouTube or something?
Yeah, and it's probably been downloaded 1.5 million times. It's a very popular. It's called Seeing Without Eyes, Knowing Without Mind. It's maybe 11 minutes long.
Do you
I
think you
know
could
that
share it
one.
on a resource? Do you think you could
Yeah,
share?
yeah, I'd be happy to.
That'd be awesome. I'd love to check that out.
I love that
It,
one.
yeah, okay. It came out before I discovered it in October of 2020. I found it. It had already been on, and it was like, oh, the angels were aligning, but there was something so profound that I couldn't understand, but I kept coming back to. Like, this is speaking to me, but I'm not sure why. But he's got this whole thing about not hanging on to concepts and how simple this is, he says. And yet I would be like, but I want to. It is simple, Spirit Song, but I think for me, it became more simple as the practice and this deep gnosis that this is where I want to be.
I love how different each person's path is and how we all are sparkly parts of the light of the divine, but in a different way and different color and different texture and different ways that we approach and experiences that we need. I was thinking, I sometimes feel a little bit of guilt because I haven't worked hard at this. But where I did work hard was when I was a child in the framework of the evangelical Christian church. And I was always trying to be good enough. Always, in the church that I was raised in, there was actually a second work of grace where after being saved, you could ask for sanctification. And then if you could achieve that total surrender, you would not sin again. However, almost everything was a sin. So I would be at the altar trying to pour it out and get to that place of emptiness and sanctity so I could live without sin in the world and then go out and then everything is and I was so sensitive to being perfect. So I was right back in it. It was work. It was work. But it was after I moved here in these mountains, in those beginning years of going into the mountains and writing and having the channeled writing come through. And I was studying a lot of different things, not any one thing intensely, but taking a lot in. And somewhere in there, it just settled in, and it was like peace. I don't have to do anything. I'm there in different concept, I'm sure, than what we are studying here, but this echoes what I have been feeling for so long here in these mountains. And maybe it was just the mountains themselves. I don't know, but I'm at the same time, I'm thankful. And then when I hear other people and how hard they've worked at different things, I think, is something wrong with me? Is this fair? Why should this be easy? My life is not easy, but my resting in faith, in trust, has always been, even in the midst of all that hard trying. Back in evangelical days, there was a trust that I was in the heart of God and I would find my way. Yeah. But I love hearing different stories and different people's, and I don't know Muji. I want that. What you
Yeah.
said, will you send it
Yes.
to me or put it on the big thread or something? So, because I want to connect with that.
I'll put it on the Being Myself thread. Yeah, I'll do that right after we're done tonight. But the music, Muji's voice, it's like ascending into the heavenly realm.
Yeah, I feel
I've
like
probably played it 100 times too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
I really want to hear it.
Mhm. I'll definitely share. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Should we move
Shall we
on,
move
BJ,
on?
or
Yeah, that's what I was
do
just
you think?
thinking.
Does that seem
Yeah.
like the right? Okay, go ahead.
Caroline, do you feel like reading?
Yeah. I'm sorry. Are we on 76?
Yes.
Yeah, bottom, very
Okay.
bottom.
Okay, I lost my page. Okay. Our self is unconditioned, unqualified being. Know yourself as that. Rest is that. Even the suggestion to rest as that is ultimately a concession to the separate self or ego, the one who believes they are other than that. It suggests we are a self who might or might not rest as that. We are that, and its nature is already at rest. It would be more accurate, though, again, not completely so, simply to suggest be knowingly the inherently peaceful and unconditionally fulfilled presence that you always and already are. It is not necessary to change or get rid of any particular experience. We may be deeply depressed or madly in love. We may be walking down the street or drinking tea. Our self shines brightly in the midst of all experience, irrespective of its content. All that is necessary is to allow ourselves to emerge from the background of experience, just as when an image fades on a screen, the screen seems to emerge. Of course, the screen does not really emerge. It was fully visible all the time. It just seemed to be obscured by the image. If our being seems to be obscured by experience and is, as a result, not clearly known, then all that is required is to soften the focus of our attention from its content and allow it to come back to ourself. The self returns to itself and recognizes or knows itself again.
Would you read that last sentence again,
Sure.
please?
If our being seems to be obscured by experience and is as a result not clearly known, then all that is required is to soften the focus of our attention from its content and allow it to come back to ourself. The self returns to itself and recognizes or knows itself again.
Self returns to itself and
Yeah.
recognizes or knows itself.
Yeah.
That's profound.
Again. Yeah.
Yes. Wow. I love that.
Me too. Yeah, go ahead, Aaron.
Once again, he's using the metaphor of the screen and the projected image upon the screen. And it's such a good metaphor for so many reasons, but when I read it now, when I read it through now, it's like, yeah, what comes up for me to kind of ask or to share is like, nobody goes to a movie theater and pays $13 to have the image be projected on the screen and just try to notice the screen without the images. I mean, right? Everyone goes to the movies for the images. And that seems like such a profound insight. And it's echoing what I said earlier about the ripening and the naturalness of being caught up in the images and caught up in the content on the screen. But I don't know, the thing that comes up for me to ask is like, who can do that? Who could go to a movie theater where there's going to be a movie and the movie gets projected and it's like, the difference between trying to just see the screen, the silver screen as the screen with no content versus paying attention to the movie, to the images being projected upon it. It seems like so much harder to try to just pay attention to the screen while the movie's playing. Just pay attention to the screen. Don't pay any attention to the movie. But the movie's so interesting. And, that's, for me, what's landing is like the way that this metaphor of the screen really does kind of like sum up my experience, at least today, but pretty commonly, like I am so interested in the content. Like I really am. Like I'm willing to pay money to go see that movie. It's a good movie. I'm interested in it. And that often is my experience with doing these practices. It's like it does take a fair amount of will for me to prioritize, witnessing the screen behind the movie versus just enjoying the movie. Like my mind's tendency is to want to enjoy the movie. Anyway, I don't know if this is making sense, but when you just read this, Caroline, the metaphor of the movie screen really brings forward, at least for me, why it's so challenging to notice the background of experience, because the movie's so interesting. The movie's so interesting. Who wouldn't want to watch the movie? You paid $13. Watch the movie.
Yeah. Well, I think what's helpful to me, or I sometimes like as a facilitator of inquiry or teacher, I sometimes use the movie metaphor too, but I use it in a different way. Like when we go to the movie, we can get lost in the movie and forget I'm sitting in a theater. Like if you're watching Jurassic Park, for instance, like you can be like, oh my God, it's about to eat me, and that's, there's like some psychosis of thinking like the thing on the screen can eat me. No, it's not actually a thing on the screen. It's not actually a dinosaur. And so I think to be able to like enjoy the movie, but be able to wake up from the illusion of it is helpful. And I think like Caroline was pointing to the via negativa, or, you didn't say those words, but you said not that, which Rupert referred to as the via negativa in one of our previous chapters. And to identify ourselves as awareness, and then to practice after that the via positiva, which is often the order that we take. Like we often have to like not that, like back up and then go out again. Yeah, I think it's a dance, like I don't think we're, like the path calls us to not be interested in the movie. Like the movie's fascinating. And if you're suffering, find a way to wake yourself up from like, oh my God, the dinosaur's about to eat me. Well, no, it's not. It's on the screen. So I can wake myself up from the scary movie and then go out and watch the movie again, So that's just sort of my take. Like I don't think that we have to disinvest ourselves from the movie. Like love of the movie is awesome. Movies are cool, and plus there's like really great movie, there's like love story movies there, there's like ones that we don't necessarily want to wake up from because it's so great to like be in this study group right now. This is a great movie, y'all are awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, right. so pulling in Rupert's other metaphor of John Smith and King Lear, it's like, I think what you're saying, BJ, is that like John Smith has a great time playing King Lear until he forgets that he's playing King Lear.
Mhm.
That's the problem. And so it's like, what you're saying is like, if you go to the movie theater and forget that it's a movie, that's when it causes us suffering.
Right.
It's fine to watch the movie, enjoy the movie, as long as you're still aware that it's just images on a screen.
Right.
In a Course in Miracles, it's kind of a different perspective of the theater, but I'm in the theater with Jesus as Holy Spirit, and I'm watching my life unfolding on the screen, but I'm just staying in the theater. So it's not necessarily like a fictional film or something. It's the story of my life, but I stay in the theater. I stay in the cinema with Jesus, as they put it. Kenneth Wapnick used to refer to this term when he was alive, and I love that that metaphor. That I'm sitting in this empty theater, and this is what I started latching on to before I got into ACIM, was this particular vantage point of the theater and the screen. But I'm staying detached. I'm the witness and the watcher of my life on the screen. And that's been profoundly helpful in this journey.
Yeah.
In my awakening, is to just pull myself out of the film of life and sit in the theater. I'm alone, and Christ is sharing that popcorn with me, and I'm working I'm working at staying, oh look, I'm in the movie, but I'm sitting back in the theater. I'm just enjoying what I witness as experience, but not getting lost in that screen of, this is your incarnation, Caroline. Different take on the theater.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been something that I've played with too, like as a I've done a lot of dancing in my life, and like in recent years that's been ballroom dancing, and like have gone through some struggle of like, but I'm not the body, but then realizing like, oh, but then I get to have the body, I get to use the body. And like, yeah, so I've been playing both with the, sort of via negativa and the via positiva of like, okay, right, this is not what I am. Like, I'm not getting lost in it, and I get to fill it out and like stretch my arm, turn my head, like do all the things. Like I still get to, it's so fun to, not get lost in it, but still fill it out and play the role and use the body while we're here.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I keep coming back to from what Aaron said in the beginning. I am all of that, aren't I? I'm all of that, but I'm none of it, but I'm all of it. And I can enjoy all of it, and I'm none of it. That mystery, But I think it's beautiful and wonderful to enjoy it all, with the awareness of, for me, it's the awareness of I am all of it and I am none of it.
Yeah.
Would you say, BJ, that your experience in dance is more enhanced and more, it's just maybe a deeper, richer experience because of the state of awareness that you possess about that? It's not that I'm deriving self-acceptance or self-esteem or, the pleasures that are necessary for me to have some self-concept through dance. It's an expression of, I'm God expressing itself.
Absolutely.
And so I really think that life's experiences are so much more layered and contextualized and richer for having the state of awareness and knowing this is what I'm here to do. I'm here to wake up, but I'm here to play.
Right.
And to learn from this polarity. And dance is fun. God wants us to have fun. We're expressing ourselves as, I call me a godlet, but how much more fun are these experiences of life, knowing that is not my entire being? You know what I'm saying? That's not the whole reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because then in my experience, like then we can do it without fear. If this is what I
Yeah.
am,
Yeah.
and I'm not fulfilled unless I get the recognition, like there's so much pressure, but then I can do it without fear and I'm already fulfilled. But now I get to go dance, like to add to the
Right.
fulfillment
Right.
that I can go dance and everybody's going to applaud, or whatever.
Yeah.
Sounds great.
The
All right.
fear. Yeah. Yeah, I thought about that.
Thank you. Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you. Thank you. All right, I think let's read the next section. I'll pick up. We cannot become what we always and already are through any kind of practice, nor need we. We can only become something that is not what we essentially are. We can become 50 years old. We can become tired. We can become married. We can become lonely. Our essential nature or self is prior to all becoming. We may ignore, overlook, or forget what we are. We may lose ourselves in experience, but even then we remain what we are, albeit unknowingly. Once we have allowed our being to be veiled by the content of experience, it will seem to be missing. And this apparent absence of ourself will be accompanied by the loss of our innate peace and joy, the joy of simply being. As a result of this lack, a great search is initiated, which often takes us on a long journey around the world. We are only searching for our being. Our self is traveling the world in search of itself. If we look for the screen in an image, we will never find it, although all we are seeing is the screen. Likewise, if we look for ourself in the content of experience, we will never find it, although all experience is pervaded by it. Our self does not seem to be missing because it is nowhere to be found. It seems to be missing because it is everywhere. It is hidden in plain view. We do not have to go anywhere or do anything to find ourselves. In fact, anywhere we go or anything we do would seem to take us away from it, because going somewhere or doing something would reinforce the belief that our being is not present. Having said that, for many people who feel their essential being and its innate peace and causeless joy are not present, the first stage may be to undertake some practice in order to access it. It is true that for a mind completely lost in objective experience, it may seem difficult to extricate itself and thus come back to itself. In this case, it may be necessary to engage in a preliminary practice, such as mantra meditation or focusing on the breath, in order to entice the mind away from its exclusive preoccupation with experience, before it is sufficiently free to return directly to its essence. But such preliminary practices are rarely necessary, especially now that the simple, direct approach suggested here, divested of the local temporal customs of the cultures in which it was previously expressed, is being made widely available. The majority of people, whatever their race, religion, or creed, and irrespective of the content of their experience, are capable of returning simply and directly from the adventure of experience to their self. That is the essence of meditation and the direct path to peace and happiness. All right, let's discuss.
I really like that paragraph. As a result of this lack, a great search is initiated, which often takes us on a long journey around the world, but we're only searching for our being. So our our self is traveling the world in search of itself. So I think about all these miles and miles I went looking and searching, exhausting, getting lost in all of this content of experience, looking for peace. So I think that's what I was searching for. And yet I make this trip around the globe and I come back to just peace is right here within me. I never had to leave home, but maybe I did in order to find myself, to return back to the place of which I am forever now. It's a journey that never, what do they say, a destination without a goal or something. I forget, there's a line I've heard somewhere, a journey without miles to a place that has always been here or something like that. But I can't say that I enjoyed that long walk around the world. There were moments of fleeting happiness, but the truest happiness is when the journey came full circle and it was just standing in my own beingness.
Yeah. We'll just sort of build on that, Caroline. I notice, and I've noticed this for a long time, that I really like coming home. Like I like the experience of I'm out for I've worked all day, or like I go somewhere, on a trip or something, and coming home is like, oh, BJ, Asher, oh, the things of the home that I like. It's so nice. But when I'm just home and I don't leave home, they lose their sparkle. Like when I come home, they sparkle. And if I had, if I don't ever leave home, they seem to lose their sparkle. And so it seems to me that trip around the world that you're referring to in your own experience, like, is necessary. You can't have the experience of homecoming. You can't have the experience of discovering yourself after having gone around the world without going around the world. There's something to that. It's like contrast. It's like the creator, sets up a context for us to have, for it to have contrast through us, through our experiences. And the contrast is meaningful.
I agree. I like just being home. I didn't used to be like this, but like tomorrow I'm going to fast and meditate for the entire day. That's my goal. Just like, I just want to go in the pool in the afternoon, but I really like being home. If I didn't leave here for 2 or 3 days, I'd be fine. Whereas I used to have to go out my door every day. Like I can't stand being home. I couldn't stand being home at all when I was out there searching and running around with my, futile efforts at searching for peace. But I know what you're saying. And coming back from a trip, it does have a sparkle to it. I don't know, man. I just dig being right here sometimes. And I go to my meditation cushion and I travel the world in my head.
Okay, now's your that's awesome. That's so great, Caroline. That's so wonderful. So happy.
Thank you. I take a lot of trips without leaving this house sometimes, and that's okay with me.
Mm-hmm.
But like Spirit Song said, we all tap into whatever speaks to us, and that does change sometimes. But I love being here now and not feeling like I have to leave and go experience something out there to feel happy.
Yeah.
I think of that. What is that game? Tetherball on the pole.
Mm-hmm.
I used to bat that tetherball. Looking around. That's kind of a metaphor for my experience. I just need to be the pole.
Mm.
But anyway, I did have one other funny thing to say. He refers to drinking tea an awful lot in this book. Have you noticed?
Yeah.
Okay.
He's British.
Right. Oh, I know. So I think it's kind of funny. Anyway, that was random. Sorry.
It's good.
It's not just that he's British, though. Doesn't he say that, like, in his community, there is a thing about tea and enjoying tea and pouring tea and like beyond just the standard British thing? Doesn't he say that they're like that he has gotten into tea culture or something and the simple pleasures of tea? I thought I read that somewhere.
I don't remember.
Okay.
Aaron, do you want to
Shall
read
I
our
read the last?
Jinx?
Jinx, you
Go.
jinx. No, you go. Okay, I'll go. The unveiling of our essential self is sometimes accompanied by a relaxation of tension in the body and an expansion of the mind. These experiences may be pleasurable, but they are temporary side effects that may or may not occur. They may be extraordinary, but they have nothing to do with the recognition of our self or being. There is nothing extraordinary about the recognition of our being. It is quite possible that it will not be accompanied by any unusual signs, at least to begin with, in the body or mind. In fact, the relaxation of the body and mind can happen so quietly and gradually that it is barely registered. In time, of course, the signs become evident, and one who knows their own being exudes peace, clarity, and warmth of heart. It would be better not to look for any signs of enlightenment, but if we were to, the best we might find would be a causeless peace and joy that accompanies all experience, irrespective of its contents. That would be the first sign in the mind of that which shines behind the mind. This peace is not the result of what is or is not taking place in experience. It is the peace that underlies and pervades it. It is the peace that passeth understanding.
Yeah. Let's discuss. One thing I can start us off with is I love this concept of causeless. And he says causeless peace and joy. And I've also heard, Byron Katie talks about causeless movement. But I've heard other mystics talk about causeless as well, which I really appreciate that pointing, because I think it's like we're often looking to past and future, and it's like a pointing to no past, like that it's not a linear thing. It just is. It's not as the result of something. It just is. And yeah, just that the concept of causeless movement or causeless peace and joy is really an effective, really an effective pointer for me. It really kind of helps me connect with the timelessness of isness. I appreciate that.
Well, to me, that points to a thought I had was in the former life that I led. It was always, when I get that, I'm going to be happy. But the causeless is the state of which I am happy, and then things, come to form or whatever. But I don't need something in particular to materialize in order for happiness to set in. I have to be the state of happiness in now. and then beautiful things unfold. So I was standing at the banks of the French Broad River today with my dog, and instead of always seeing the metaphor of a river taking things downstream for me, or just the piece of it, I saw the river flowing toward me and bringing that which I desire, I deserve. But it was a beautiful, like, I don't know, it was this beautiful epiphany of like the river is flowing in abundance toward me. But I am happy now. Whatever is going on around me, it's to be at peace in whatever situation I find myself. That is causeless peace, causeless joy, ceaseless peace. But I love resting and knowing that happiness comes when you're happy, when you're at a state of peace and calm and receptive. You're in receptive mode to joy. Beautiful things come from that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he says that in the end, the peace is not the result of what is or is not taking place in experience. It's, the peace that passes all understanding. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's like, I'm not happy because anything. I'm just happy.
Right.
Just happy. Just happy. Just peaceful.
Yeah. A great place to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Any final wrap up comments, Aaron or Spirit Song?
Just appreciation for all of you and all of this. Yeah, thank you for holding space for us all to be together.
Mm.
And great gratitude to the material and the man who wrote it, and the ability to focus in on what he's saying and have little lights flashing all the time. Or
Yeah.
just being in peace.
I was thinking that too, Spirit Song, specifically because I've got my little back flap of my book, and his little image is printed on the back flap, and I saw his picture when I was reading, and I'm like, oh, Rupert, thank you so much. I mean, this man is a brilliant teacher. I mean, he just is able to like distill, what can be difficult concepts into such simple language, and I appreciate him a lot.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, and then his patience, to keep like circling it and circling it and circling it. The same thing, and stating it in so many different ways.
Yeah.
You got real fuzzy, Aaron.
I know.
You
My
look nice
my
to-
little
nice to
camera doesn't
pet.
want to focus on me anymore. My camera's like, show me Rupert again. I'm handsome.
Yeah. One time I was on a Zoom call with a highly aware man, very enlightened. He was kind of my guru in Dallas, and all of a sudden he just blipped off. We're like, oh, he just raptured, went right into the next dimension. I'm like, where did he go? So funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All that is required is to soften the focus of our attention.
I did want to ask, did y'all have a good trip? Aaron,
Yeah.
DJ, did y'all have a good trip?
It was a good trip. Yeah.
It was wonderful.
You're looking very digitalized.
Yeah. There we
There we
go. I just needed to guide it back to me, I guess.
Over here, back to the self.
Right here.
I'm budget, a
Out
good
from the
trip.
content of experience
Yeah.
back to the self.
That's a great metaphor right there. Yeah. The blurry and the focused. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I learned something every Wednesday. It's great.
Yeah, gosh, me too.
Yeah.
It feels like that reminds me of like what Spirit Song said, like these little lights going off. Like it feels like,
Yeah.
there's so much of me, like I've already read this book, there's so much of me that already gets it or something. But every time anyway, there's still another part of me that gets it or something. There's like these little parts that like get in line with it, like, oh, like, yeah.
Oh, I like that.
Even if we get it, we can still get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm with you, Spirit Song. It's the other perspectives are for me deeply impactful, like learning through others' journeys. And that helps me too. Yeah, thank you.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Mhm.
See you next week, if not sooner.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you all. Really appreciate each one
Thank
of you.
you. Thanks.
Yeah.
Me too. Adios.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.